Yeah.
Let's. All right. I think you were. You ready? You were telling us about your experiences in the Neptune and as a naval photographer.
P2V Neptune, and much of the flying. This was a base. It was the Naval Air Development Center, all experimental, a lot of civilians, even up in the photography section. Um, but we were uh, high loaded with ranks, and I eventually became a second class pretty officer. Uh, well, the time I was there, but I didn't get as much flying as I had wanted to do. Uh, a lot of our flying on the Neptunes were done with mapping. So we had a camera permanently mounted, uh, permanently mounted in the rear deck of the plane, shooting straight down. That's the only way that camera could shoot. But the negatives came out as 9 inches by huge negatives. 400 feet rolls of film that we had to develop, and it was all done by hand with one machine. You put it into the tank of developer, and you got one machine that's rolling it back and forth, 400 feet of film, and then it would have to be transferred to another one that's in the shortstop and another one in the fixer as photo developing sets.
Hey, Bill.
So you gained experience with every segment of
Yeah,
this
yeah.
world.
And I did a lot of printing too in the darkroom, with
Yeah, and I gave
making
it,
prints for all these various offices that needed them. But it was very fussy work.
And then where did you go from there? How much longer did you have during your active duty?
That was the end of my active duty.
Okay.
Was that station? I spent the most time there.
Mm-hmm.
But the flights were fascinating. We had we out of this one base we flew flights over the Virginia wild areas up near the coast. We did some with magnesium flash bombs on the wings, lined up on the wings. I hate to think of what the pedestrians down below, the few farms that might have been available, were thinking of these huge flashes coming from overhead. They probably thought the world was at an end. And
Since all of this was so new in its developmental stages, I mean, you
yeah,
really
yeah,
experienced lots of processes
yeah,
in their very
yeah.
virgin periods. Did you notice in ensuing years, did you pick up on things that the Navy was doing or
No,
other military branches and thought, wow, that started with.
I never did, but I think I realized that the film developing was primitive. It became primitive, but it wasn't then. It was the technology then. So I think I was more in the present than I was in trying to think we'd ever have anything different than that. One of my interesting shots or interesting times on that plane was shooting obliques, and they handed me a couple of times. They handed me a 35 millimeter camera, Kodak, and in that case, they were dropping dye markers over the Atlantic Ocean, east of Virginia, dropping dye markers, and then they would watch and photograph how they were dispersed in the sea. But the scary part for me, well, first of all, we had about 4 or 5 photographers on each mission, and they had no seats for us in the plane. And so the Neptune was a unique twin-engine plane, a big one, but it also had 2 JATO units on the wings, along with surplus gas tanks too. Majado units, they were jet assisted takeoff units. And so when they go to takeoff, they'd fire up those units along with the propellers full blast. And you're like a rocket. And all we could do was find a stanchion or a wall, you know, to brace our feet against like this and just hang on while they were taking off. It was quite an experience, but they put me in an open hatch, and all I can remember, the hatch was probably almost 3 foot tall by maybe 2 feet wide. Just an opening with a seat and a nice seat belt. I like that part of it, the harness. But then these planes were flown, at least the ones I was in, they were flown by guys, junior JDGs. They were hardly out of flight school. young kids, not much older than I was. And that made it a little scary. We never got into anything shaky, but just knowing that who was at the controls wasn't a comfortable feeling, you know, because what they did to photograph the dye markers after they dropped them in the ocean, and they'd be dispersing slowly with the ocean current, and the plane would be banking up almost vertical. The wings were almost vertical. And I'm dangling by the seat belt. Safe, I felt safe there, and shooting with a Kodak. I don't know how many years they made Kodak 35 millimeters, but they stopped making those after a while. So anyway, that was just one of the scarier parts, yeah. So
now here you are. At what age? How old are you, if you don't mind my asking?
No, I don't mind at all.
Is that going to bend?
I got married when I was 23. I'd be 24, I guess. Born in 31. You can figure it.
About 93 years old?
Now I am 93 and a half, yeah.
93 and a half.
Yeah.
And how do you feel watching these ducks come out of these?
I'm excited for what you're going to do with them. I'm excited for the rebuilding process. I've toured the Air Zoo a few times, and they have a restoration of separate hangars where they do all the restoration work, volunteer work. But I've watched them, and I've seen them restore. The current one was a SBD, a dive bomber. It was fished out of Lake Michigan. And in fact, many of their planes that they've done were at the bottom of Lake Michigan.
Right, because it was such
You know that history.
an enormous training ground. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that's how we are at MAPS, where our museum is actually a hangar.
Right.
But the original part of the MAPS Air Museum is what our entire restoration building is now. And the guys, we can restore 5 aircraft at one time.
Is that right? Really?
So currently, they just finished Sikorsky H-19 helicopter from the Korean War. They have it kitted out as a
chopper. Okay.
Yeah, chopper. Yeah, we actually have a Kiowa and a Cobra. We have over 60 aircraft right now that are completely, none of them fly, but the vast majority of them are still owned by the military. So
Okay.
basically we get a lot of them that are still military owned, and we restore them.
Before the Corsair, what other models were you restoring?
Oh,
Not choppers. I was never interested in choppers.
B-26.
yeah,
Say
we
what?
have a B-26 Marauder,
Really?
one of 6 in the world. Yeah, we have one.
Oh, wow.
We might need to move here.
Okay.
We're gonna.
All right, hold on a second till we see what
Yeah,
we're supposed
yeah.
to do.